wish I was in the land of cotton wool, and there I have forgotten the way. Look away, Dixieland. In Dixieland where I was born in early on the frosty morning. Look away, Dixieland. There I wish I was in Dixie. Hooray, hooray.
Confederate flag, a fixture in NASCAR Southern culture for decades, now no longer permitted a place in the sport.
They're trying to take away our culture. They're trying to take away our history.
1825 to 1866, 12.5 million Africans were taken from their homeland and forcibly shipped across the Atlantic. A journey that almost 2 million of them wouldn't survive. Before boarding the ships at African port cities, slaves were stripped of their clothing and remaining possessions and had their heads completely shaved. Slaves were forced to relieve themselves where they sat, creating hellish conditions when combined with the heat and lack of ventilation below deck. Disease was rampant. Measles, smallpox, influenza, scurvy, and dysentery, the #1 killer, ravaged slaves and crew members alike. The slaves generally spent about 8 hours a day above deck, but were also subject to forced exercise, sometimes including dance and song for the entertainment of the crew. Disobedient slaves were tortured and beaten, usually whipped with the especially cruel cat-o'-nine tails, a tool designed to inflict maximum pain. Women, while usually left unshackled, were raped and sexually abused by members of the crew, sometimes arriving in the New World carrying the children of their attackers. But it was the women, using their minuscule freedoms, who would often coordinate mutinies against their captors. But these rebellions were rarely successful.
Your mother was a slave, sister was a slave, father was a slave.
They know nothing about reading right there. All that I know, they teach you to mind your master and your mistress.
I am 101 years old. Other people didn't have no beds when they were slaves. You want to sleep on the floor. Out of 10, out of 12. We didn't know nothing. Didn't like to look at no book.
So they taken that old woman, poor old woman, cat in the peach orchard and whipped her.
And if they want you to hang all night long, you hang tobacco. It didn't matter about your tired. Being tired, you're afraid to say you're tired. And if we got free, we didn't know nothing. But we didn't have no property, we didn't have no home, we had nowhere, nothing.
They are haunting voices from the past, voices of men and women, Americans, who were born in slavery. He was a graduate student when he interviewed the former slaves, including the 2 women you hear in this broadcast. Himself interviewed just before he died in 1979, Falk was going on about how he believed in giving blacks the right to go to school, giving them the right to vote, giving them the right to go into anything they qualified for.
For a period of nearly 80 years between the Civil War and World War II, black Southerners were no longer slaves, but they were not yet free. Generations of black Southerners were forced to labor against their will.
Free black people could be just picked up and put in jail. The sheriff department could sell people to corporations and coal mines.
People's lives were truly stolen from them. Their freedom was taken away.
In recent years, there has been a robust debate over Confederate symbols, from flags being taken down to statues being removed, to find people very upset at the idea of Confederate statues being taken away.
You can't change history. You can't pick and choose what you decide is history.
I think I'll just leave them alone and leave them where they are, you know. They're part of history.
Let's do that, and let's look at the unique heritage of these symbols.
Dixie Stampede is a musical extravaganza of sight and sound, centered around a friendly north-south rivalry. Friendly servers bring the delicious 4-course feast right to you.
It can seem like the Civil War is just a friendly rivalry, a fun, colourful part of US history, but that omits the key fact about the Civil War. The Confederacy was fighting for the preservation of slavery. The Confederate Vice President gave in 1861, in which he articulated the basic principles for the Confederate nation.
Its foundations are laid, its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to the superior race, is his natural and normal condition.
Wow. Subordination to the superior race. That is explicit. But that's a very hard fact for some people to accept, especially if a member of your family fought for the Confederacy. And sometimes the understandable desire to want to distance your relative from that cause can lead to people distorting the cause itself. Just watch as one man at a community meeting in North Carolina defended a Confederate statue by talking about his family history.
My great-grandfather was a Confederate soldier, and I was proud of that because my opinion of his fight was for his rights. I'm really concerned about our monument. I want it to stay. It reminds me that I got a little rebel in me. You know, we all want to kind of be independent. We all have a little rebel in us, even the ladies.
Ooh, even the ladies! Collectively, they were fighting to preserve the institution of slavery. And I honestly get wanting a more comfortable history for your family. But in doing so, you can't invent a more comfortable history for your country, because you would be erasing the actual painful experiences of many Americans, as a fellow North Carolinian explains.
When I walk by this statue, it becomes very painful when I think of the suffering that my ancestors went through. They enslaved people, abused people for their own economic impact. And it should not be celebrated by these statues.
Right. And that is the harsh reality of what was done by those Confederate men. Of what happens when two people have wildly different views of the same symbol. Just watch this local news clip.
Why do you carry that flag? Because this is my heritage. My family fought to save their farm under this flag. Who was working that farm?
Oh, that is a good, tough question. And the news clip actually cut out there, but we were so intrigued to find out what his response was, we tracked it down. And whatever you are expecting, you're going to be surprised.
Who was working that farm?
My
family was. Who was working the farm? They were poor. Do you know how much a slave cost back then?
Whoa! Whoa, whoa, whoa! You know you are in the wrong when you decide your best argument is screaming at a black man. Do you know how expensive you used to be? Actually brings us back to Confederate monuments, because there is something about them that symbolises our reluctance to have that conversation, and that is the dates that they went up. Another spike in the 50s and 60s as the civil rights movement was gaining steam. So those statues weren't so much commemorating recently fallen dead as sending a pretty hostile message to African Americans. For some Confederate statues, the intent is crystal clear. In that town meeting from before, the statue that they were debating was this one, which went up in 1914. And a leader of that county's chapter of the KKK gave a speech at its dedication, calling the occasion an opportunity to recall the achievements of the great and good of our own race and blood. The largest Confederate memorial, the carving on Stone Mountain in Georgia, is located where the 20th century KKK was born. Went up even more recently. Oh, I want to show you one that was erected on private lands, but very much for public consumption.
Erected in 1998. It portrays Nathan Bedford Forrest on his horse, gun in one hand and sword in the other. General and an early leader of the KKK.
That is just objectively terrifying. Statues commemorate people who fought a war to preserve slavery, were erected to assert white supremacy, and were dedicated by Klan members. And yet, there is a blanket defense that tends to get offered by people, and not just people, also this guy.
They're trying to take away our culture. They're trying to take away our history.
OK, so that argument is taking these statues down obliterates history, which is clearly just ridiculous. First, monuments are not how we record history. Books are. Museums are.